Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Love Meets Literature. I am your host, Rachel, and you can find me on Instagram at Paperbacks and Sketchbooks.
And I am your other host, Joe, and you can find us at Love Meets Literature.
You can find us nearly everywhere on the internet, so please do give us a follow. It will help get our podcast out there. So today's episode is going to be a tad similar to last week. Just chill discussion, talking about life and the cold weather and books and whatnot. So it's probably like the coldest day of the winter so far. This morning I woke up and it was a real feel of -11 degrees.
That's way too cold.
So cold, and I've made the decision that I will not be leaving the house if it is negative temperatures because I don't want to have to wear thousands of layers because then I'm just uncomfortable and claustrophobic in my own clothing.
Yeah, I really hate when you go outside and it's super, super cold, and then you go back inside and then you have to like strip off all your layers because now you're way too warm.
Yeah, it's so annoying. But in less annoying news, we are 3 months out from our wedding now.
Woo, yay.
I know it feels like it's been over a year away for the past year.
That's true. It did feel really far away, and now it's like all of the sudden there.
I know. I guess I should have believed everyone when they said it really sneaks up on you because it did really sneak up on me. And now I feel like I'm scrambling once again to get things done.
See, I still blame everybody else for that because we tried to do everything right away, and they were like, no, wait until 3 and 4 months out for some reason.
It stresses me out. I'd rather get everything done way ahead of time so then I don't have to think about it. I don't have to give it a single thought.
Right. I don't know why they do that. It must be something in the industry. It just doesn't make sense to plan that far out.
Well, it's probably just for finalizing like little details because I'm sure a lot of people they would pick one thing like a year away and then as it gets closer, they'll change their mind and be like, "Hey, actually, I want this." So like if it's closer to your wedding date, there's less room to change your mind.
Yeah, I guess that's true. There's probably a lot of people out there that their taste changes over the course of, 10 or 12 months. So by the time they get to the wedding, they're deciding on a completely different whatever it might have been.
Yeah, it's just a lot of work and I never want to plan an event again.
Agreed.
Well, and I won't be planning an event again. If anyone asks me, I'm be like, no, just hire somebody. Don't do it because I don't want to do it.
Yeah, that's true. I definitely think I can't even really think of any other big events that would need planning because nothing's quite on the level of a wedding. Like that's the big one for most people.
No, like I will never plan a birthday party. I don't even like birthday parties. So
No, I wouldn't do anything like that. I've always been just chill though. Like if it was up to me, if I was planning the whole wedding, I'd be like, let's just get like 3 or 4 of us, knock this out real quick.
I tried, but I was vetoed.
That's fair.
But I did get my invitation samples. So that's another thing off the list. I've got to work on figuring out what I want the table numbers to look like. That's just a problem for another day. I feel like I have 3 months. I have time to decide what I want the table numbers to look like. I don't even know how many tables we're going to have yet anyway. So I could just wait on that.
I know the other big thing that we have to do still is the seating chart.
Yeah, but we can't do that until we know who's coming.
I know, but that's just like the big one that I keep thinking of.
Yeah, that's going to be a whole other thing. Honestly, I might just get everybody's name printed on place cards so I can just have them ready and then just get those little stickers with your meal option on them, like chicken, beef, or like a little leaf for vegetarian. And then I can just stick it to their place card with their meal option.
It's a good idea.
But we still have to wait for everyone's RSVPs to do a seating chart. Just staying ahead of the game in case it takes long for whatever website I ordered the place cards through to print them.
Yeah, that's true. I just think of like everything else I feel like is a design choice where you can just be like, no, I don't like that, or yes, I do like that. As where the seating chart is going to be like, we have to put thought into that.
Yeah, who hates each other?
Well, thankfully, most of our family, or most of my family at least, likes one another. So I'd be willing to argue that all of my family likes one another.
Listen, if I accidentally seat someone next to someone they don't like, it's not my problem.
I mean, yeah, that's true.
They can be cordial for a dinner.
You shouldn't be looking at each other anyway. You should be looking at us.
Don't look at me.
Oh, you're right. That's funny that you're somebody that hates to be the center of attention, but you're going to be because it's, the wedding day.
Why do you think I do a podcast instead of having a BookTube channel?
I guess that's true because then you can't be perceived.
Yeah, nobody can look at me.
Funny how that works.
I know, right? In other life news, I wear glasses now. That's a new development.
Oh, right. I guess people didn't know that before.
They don't really know what I look like. I don't post my face a lot. But yeah, I never had to wear glasses before until now, recently. But I will say that I can finally look at my computer screen and my books without having to hold them inches from my face now. So that's nice.
Yes. I would assume that that's probably a lot easier on the eyes.
Well, it's less brain power too.
True. You can read longer now.
I know. I don't feel as tired and fatigued. The eye fatigue's not there. The brain fog's not there. It's like I'm a whole new person now.
Well, I guess it's a good idea to get your eyes checked every once in a while.
Well, I just never did because I could always see fine.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I know anything about eyes. My eyes get tired and I've got glasses, but
It's not like you go to the eye doctor.
no.
So I guess that's our exciting life update. Unless you've got anything to add.
No, I can't really think of anything.
Yeah, we're not super exciting over here. We try to be. The most exciting part of this podcast is the books.
That's true.
So back to the super cold weather. We've had like few polar vortexes in our time. It's not nearly that cold right now, but it just brought up this question of, was there ever like a favorite snow day or like cold freezing day activity that you would do as a kid?
Yes. And
what was that?
I can already tell you that my answer is going to be very different than yours. So I grew up in a rural town. So snow days were often filled with either riding quads or snowmobiles or something along those lines up and down the road. And our favorite one was we had a ditch in front of our house that used to have a big tree. We had cut it down. And on snow days, we would make a ramp because it led right off the road. So we'd make a ramp on one side, and then we would just throw a bunch of snow so it'd make it nice and fluffy in the center. And then someone would be driving the quad, and the other person would be on the back with a rope, and they would be either on like a sled or a snowboard or something like that. And then you get pulled and you'd hit the jump and land in the pile of snow. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I didn't do that.
I'm not surprised.
We would go sledding once in a while, though. There was this giant hill that, people just went to go sledding.
Naturally.
So there was one hill that was like in a park. And then there was one hill that like wasn't in a park. We never went to the hill that wasn't in the park because, hello, it's not in a park. So we only went to the one that was in the park. And it would get really crowded. And I've had my fair share of sled casualties. It's not fun. I've definitely jumped off my sled before to like avoid hitting a small child because they would just walk out in front of me. I'm like sledding down the hill. I'm like, hello, where's your mother? Like, you're just coming into oncoming traffic here. So yeah, I've like definitely like injured myself doing that. Not really injured, but like I would like land hard on my side after, veering out of the way.
Now, did you only do sledding or did you ever try like skiing or snowboarding?
I'm not adventurous. Skiing and snowboarding is not in my family's blood. The thought of that would never even come up. People have asked me before, oh, you ever gone skiing? I'm like, no, that never even crossed my family's mind.
That's so funny.
We're not the athletic type.
Well, that's fair.
I never had any interest either. It looks dangerous.
It definitely is obviously like a sport where you're using your body to do things. So there's risk of injury. In my opinion, snowboarding was fun and we did it a lot. And contrary to you, we wouldn't go to parks because I was in a rural area. So we would just find like where I lived, there was kind of like a hill on one side of the town. And so you could go up to the top of that. And then there was like this cornfield that you'd run across. And then over there was a hill that went down into a creek. And so it was cold enough the creek would freeze over and we would just sled across it, or you would set up a little ramp to try to jump the creek. And so we used to do that. And then, yeah, you got hurt a lot.
I would never do that.
I mean, I wouldn't recommend it now because it would hurt a lot more now that I'm older. When I was, 12 and 13, it didn't really hurt that bad because you just bounce and get up. Did you have any indoor snow day hobbies?
I mean, not aside from the usual get up, do my normal chores, and then do whatever I wanted to do. We would go out in our backyard all the time.
Were you a snowman family? Did you guys build a snowman together?
My sister and I would attempt to build snowmen. It didn't always work. We threw our fair share of snowballs at each other. We've tried to build igloos before.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, we would only get so far though before we would run out of snow because igloos take a lot of snow. And like, you're probably like, oh, how do you run out of snow? But like, you run out of the good packing snow and then you're
Right.
kind of stuck. And then you have like 3/4 of an igloo. And you're like, darn, I don't have enough to make the top. So then you just kind of have this like snowy wall.
Well, it's still fun. Now, I have to ask, were you one of the people that would follow the superstitions and try to make a snow day happen?
How do you make a snow day happen?
You never heard of these things?
No.
So, one of the big ones I know growing up was if there was supposed to be a bunch of snow that night, in order to make a snow day happen, is you would have to put a spoon in your freezer. And then before you go to bed, you would take the spoon out of the freezer and put it underneath your pillow.
That is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Well, it's a superstition. It's just,
We didn't follow superstitions in my household.
Well, it was fun when you were a kid.
I didn't even know superstitions were like a thing until I was a teenager.
I guess it's more like, I don't know, folklore or something like that. But there used to all be just a ton of different things. Like there was another one to get it to snow on Christmas was kind of a similar concept. Whereas like you would have to take, I think it was a bowl or something like that. You'd fill it with ice and then put it underneath your bed, and it's supposed to make it snow on Christmas Day. It's just all these silly little things.
I've never heard of any of those before, but we rarely got any snow days. Like our school like never closed.
We got quite a few because I lived about 15 minutes from the school by bus ride, and there was this long strip that basically there was only one way in and one way out. And so when that froze over, the bus couldn't make it across, and so then we would just get a snow day.
Yeah, there have been times before too when like we've been on our way to school and then like in the middle of being on our way to school, we learn, oh, we don't have to go to school. So, they were very last minute sometimes with their closures, which I'm sure was very annoying for the parents. But it happened and, I always liked a snow day, but I didn't like that you would have to make up the days at the end of the year.
Yeah, I thought that was kind of silly.
Yeah, but it makes sense because you are missing a day. It's like working a job. You have to make up the hours.
I mean, yeah, but I was like 9, so it's not like
They're
missing
getting
one
you
extra
ready
day.
for the workforce. It's your education.
I mean, where I grew up, it's pretty notorious. It's a joke that you weren't that smart if you went to the schools that I went to. I'm not going to say them because I don't want to be rude. And I think I'm decently smart, so I just lived in the cornfields. Used to get the corn education, as they called it.
Well, I didn't believe in no superstitions. I didn't even know those were a thing until now. I'm like, it's the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
Really? I mean, they used to be really big in our school. Like, there would be like groups of people that would be like, make sure you go home and put the spoon underneath your pillow.
I feel like you're lying because that just sounds dumb.
We were like 10 years old. Got to keep that in mind. And this was completely before any version of social media. So if someone's like older brother told you something like this, you just believed it 100%.
You must have been a gullible group of kids.
I mean, again, we were 10. Like, it's not like you have a lot of, nowadays, 10-year-olds, I'd say, are probably smarter because they have more resources.
Outdoor recess when it was snowing outside, though, was really fun. We would go to school in our snow pants and our giant winter coats and our snow boots. And then, we would have to take them all off for class and then put them all back on when we had to go outside. So it's like just a bunch of like 10-year-olds in the hallway, like full of snow, like just making a mess everywhere. The poor janitor's got to clean it up afterwards. All of our wet clothes are just like across the floor and it's a big old mess, but it was so fun.
I do remember that. I do have very fond memories of just tracking a ton of snow inside, and then the janitors have to clean it. I mean, I felt bad now, but back then it was just fun. You didn't really care.
Yeah, because you're just like a little kid playing out in the snow with all your friends, and it's fun.
So I looked up some of the other superstitions around snow days because I knew I wasn't crazy. So some of them are wearing pajamas inside out. So you go to sleep the following day. You put a spoon underneath your pillow because it's supposed to symbolize a snow shovel. The ice cube ritual, which is flushing ice cubes down the toilet. Then there's the snow dance, which is like a rain dance. And then there's putting a white crayon on your windowsill.
A white what?
A white crayon, like, Crayola crayon.
A crayon?
We're not going to do this again. We're not going to judge my pronunciation of words.
Like, what's a crane? A crane is a bird.
A crayon.
Crayon? A crayon? Like a
Crayon.
cranberry?
Yeah. I don't know. Crayon?
It's a crayon.
That sounds weird.
It's always been a crayon. Crayon.
So I'm not crazy, and I didn't make those up. They're actual superstitions that people would do for snow days.
Well, they all sound crazy to me, and I've heard of exactly 0 of those. So anyways, seems like we both had very different childhoods in terms of snow days.
Yes, we did.
But that's okay. Here we are now, talking about books together. So this episode, just like a chill book chat similar to last week, going over some current and recent reads. I have actually gotten a lot of reading done in the past week, and that is thanks to audiobooks. Audiobooks are reading. It's just another form of consuming them. Anybody who would like to tell me otherwise, just keep your mouth shut because I'm not going to listen to you. So one of these books that I listened to was Single Player by Tara Tai. This is just a random book that I found on Spotify. Yes, Spotify does have audiobooks for premium subscribers now. It's pretty awesome, but they only give you not that many hours a month. I don't know the exact number. So I listened to this audiobook. This is also a newer release, by the way. I believe it came out earlier this month, and it's a debut. A debut author. I always love reading new authors, but it makes me sad because she doesn't have any more books that I can read. And I really loved this book. It's my first 5-star read of the year, too. So Single Player by Tara Tai is a romantic comedy. It's a queer romance. It's got some LGBTQ themes in it. We love diversity in books over here. And it was about video games.
Hence the name.
Yes. So that's what really drew me to it, was that it was a rom-com based around the video game industry, which I thought was super interesting. And I thought it was done really well. There were a ton of game references. They referenced Zelda, Mario, a ton of other games that I'm not even super familiar with. But regardless, I still caught on to references, and I thought it made the book very entertaining. There was also the enemies to lovers trope. So I love enemies to lovers. The enemies were this new video game designer intern and her boss. So it was also a workplace romance. There was also a sprinkle of fake dating in there too. The video game designer intern ended up seeing this one girl, and they decided like they weren't a good fit for each other, but they were going to go on fake dating for the sake of showing some people that they could hold a relationship. Oh, it was actually because of this girl's parents were always like, oh, you need a relationship, and they always saw her failed relationships. So she wanted to show them that she could be in a relationship, and Thanksgiving was coming up and they were coming over. And she's like, hey, my girlfriend's going to be here. And they were like, okay, nice, awesome. We want to meet her. But then lo and behold, they end up, kind of breaking up. But then the other girl decides, well, maybe we can fake date, because then it also shows my fellow D&D players. Yeah, I forgot there's Dungeons and Dragons in this book too. It also shows my fellow D&D players that I also can hold a relationship, and I've moved on from my past relationship. So it's like a whole thing. So I really liked how all of the tropes were done. There's also like a lot of talk about, sexism, racism, and homophobia within the video game industry, which I thought was pretty interesting to read about. And overall, it was a super entertaining read. I really loved the characters. Our main characters were fabulous. It was an easy listen, and I thought it was a stellar debut novel, and I really, really want Tara Tai to release another book.
That's pretty high praise for a debut.
Well, it was my first 5-star of the year. It was so much fun. And like me explaining it doesn't even do it justice. Like it was so good. If you listen to the audio, you will genuinely be entertained the whole time because the narrator is awesome. I think the narrator did very well with all of the characters, and, the banter was spot on. Video game references, like I said, it just made it super, super fun. So, like, if you are a romance fan and you're looking to diversify your romances and you also love video games, like, you'll definitely enjoy this book.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that was super fun. What have you been reading?
Well, mine is not getting as much praise as yours.
Oh,
I've been reading Lady of the Lake, which is The Witcher #7, and it is taking everything in my body to not DNF it.
which is surprising.
The books all follow a similar layout, so to speak, which is boring nonsense, Geralt, Ciri. And so that's kind of the perspective it takes on. It's always there's boring nonsense that doesn't really matter that much. Then there's something happening from the side of Geralt, and you can see what he's doing and where he's going and his thoughts and etc. And then there's Ciri. And in this book, the boring nonsense has been nearly 80 of the 100 first pages.
That's a lot of boring nonsense.
Yes. And we haven't seen like any of Ciri yet. There was a little bit in the very beginning, but it just didn't make any sense. And I thought it was infuriating because the part that's so frustrating about this is the last book, #6, ends on like a huge monumental thing. And then the beginning of this book, you would think, is going to continue off the huge monumental thing. But then all of a sudden you're learning about these two new characters who are like seemingly completely irrelevant to the story so far. And they're like reliving or retelling the story of Geralt and Ciri and how they got to the point that they're at and what happened after the fact. And I don't understand why. Like why that decision was, hey, let's fast forward into the future after everything's over. And now we're going to introduce these, technically it's 3 new characters. And we're going to have the 2 main ones retell the story instead of just continuing from where the story left off.
That's a little weird considering the ending of the previous book was so huge.
Right. And that it's like, it made me come into it thinking I thought it was going to be like, hey, here's where we left off. You know, all that crazy stuff that you were loving and the action and the fast pace. Just kidding. It's all gone. And now we're going to just talk about this totally other thing for some reason. I had skimmed, so I've been listening to the audiobook on YouTube, but some of the comments that I read kind of echoed what I was feeling. Like I was deliberately not going to read the comments. And then I got about probably 2 chapters in and I was like, is this going to do anything or is this just the whole book? And I scrolled down and started reading some of the comments and everyone kind of echoes the same thing of like, it's so slow and it's so weird that they're starting from this point rather than all of the important stuff that happened at the end of the last book. And there's also this really strange thing in the very beginning where the story is a fictional place. It's completely fictional, obviously. But the area, if I remember correctly, kind of takes place in takes inspiration from medieval Poland and Europe and Germany and kind of those places. The story alludes to the timelines of King Arthur intersecting with the timeline of The Witcher. But they're like parallel universes, kind of. It's a little silly, is kind of what I'm coming around to.
I'm now the meme of the lady with the math equations in front of her face.
Right. And imagine how I felt when I was like, what is happening right now? What happened to all of the basically the cliffhanger that we were left on? And now it's like this, and I'm so confused. And then in the beginning they kind of tease you by having it from Siri's perspective. So I'm like, "Oh, okay, we're going to learn about what happened." And then she goes, "Do you want me to tell you what happened?" Cuz she's like talking to this guy, and he's like, "Yeah." And then she's like, "Okay." And then all of a sudden now it's at Geralt, and we're learning about, or then it cuts to these two new people who were like, here's yada yada, whatever nonsense. Oh, let's go talk about Geralt now. And I'm like, what is happening? It's like whoever laid out the story deliberately chopped things up to make it more enticing, but all it's done is made it infuriating to read.
Have you thought about just finding out what happens at the end?
I thought about just like skipping through and just being like, okay, what actually, like, let's get to a good part.
Yeah, that's tough when you've read an entire series and then you get to the last book and it's not good.
Well, and tell me about it, because I'm an ending person. So I'm like, this is super important. If you blow it here, I'm not afraid to write off your whole entire series.
Yeah, that's disappointing.
Unfortunately, as it stands, the only books I would recommend someone read is probably the very first two, because those stories are entirely about Geralt and Yennefer, and they're really, really good.
Does it conclude Geralt and Yennefer's story though?
No, not by any stretch of the imagination. But at the same time, they're kind of, because they were written originally as short stories, so they kind of have endings to them. And the idea was that, because he wrote those way, way, way before the original Witcher books, and everyone loved Geralt and Yennefer. And so that's when he decided to write the rest of the books. At least that's how I understood it. And then he wrote those 5 core books. And then I believe he wrote some more short stories afterwards, which came back and are now part of the original first 2, because they were technically prequels. And then now he's written the 8th book, which I believe is supposed to be a wrap up of everything else. And it's probably because the ending of this 7th book sucks, if I had to guess. But we'll see.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to tell you there.
In the defense of the author, though, I am only 20% of the way through the book. So there's a lot of book to come back and redeem. But it's just the first 20% has been like, the first 15% was so difficult. Like, genuinely, you probably could skip the first 3 chapters and it wouldn't really change that much. At least the first 2.
I hate when books are like that because it's like, why did the author include this information?
Yes. And unless there's something that happens later in the story that reveals the point of these 2 other characters that they introduced, he's really got to redeem himself for that, in my opinion, because I genuinely don't understand what the point of those characters are.
Well, if there's 2 random characters that were just introduced in this book, I feel like they have to have some purpose that's revealed.
I mean, we'll see. I don't really know. Because like right now they furthered the narrative, but if you completely omitted them and then just brought it to Geralt's perspective, it would have been completely equal. You could have done that just fine.
Yeah, interesting.
So maybe there's something later that connects all the dots and like a satisfying pattern or something. I'm not sure. So like I said, not as high praise as your book, unfortunately. I will say though, I think depending on how this book goes is kind of going to be the indicator if I want to read the 8th book. Because unless I'm very satisfied with this, or the 8th book is actually like a wrap up to everything, I might just leave it at the 7. We'll see.
If I'm reading a book in a series and it's like not grabbing my attention, or it's just not what I was expecting, or it leaves me questioning some of the author's choices, I usually don't read the next one either at all or not for a very long time.
Yeah, I'm still debating if I'm going to finish this one out. I feel like I want to. However, my goal was to read a book every 10 days. And technically, I'm not going to finish this in that time frame. But I could just axe it and say, this book got DNF'd because it wasn't good enough, and then move on to the next one. So that way I have a nice clean set of 10 days.
I mean, you don't want to just like DNF it for the sake of your reading goal, though.
I know, but like if it's not that good and it's going to affect my reading goal. I mean, you know,
Okay, so if you're not enjoying it, like, yes, DNF if you really don't think it's worth it to continue. But I don't support DNFing books just for the sake of meeting a reading goal.
well, that's fair because I also told you not to do that too.
Exactly. But I'm trying to be more intentional with my DNFing. Like if I am not if you like if your book is not grabbing me within the first 20%, I will not finish it.
Well, by that logic, it has technically less than 1% to grab me. I'm technically at 19%. I know I said 20 earlier, but the round number is better.
Some people know that books are not for them within like the first chapter and they put it aside and never pick it up again. So you are allowed to DNF a book at whatever point you want to DNF a book.
I will say, technically, as of the time of recording this, I have 1.5 days left in order to maintain my reading goal. So I feel like it's only fair that I give it the 1.5 more days. And if it hooks me, I'll continue it out. Otherwise, if not by then, you're going to the back of the pile.
Okay. Well, I've also read some other really great books this past week, thanks to audio. Sorry, I don't have anything bad to say about my books.
No, that's good. Let's get back to the positive side.
So I read The Hunger Games and its sequel, Catching Fire. Now, the first time I read The Hunger Games, I was in 8th grade. We read it for class. We read it for English class. Why we read it for English class, I'm unfamiliar with the reasoning. I don't know why, but all I know is that I was not a fan of The Hunger Games when we read it in 8th grade. I thought it was boring. I thought the action was boring. I didn't like the characters. I didn't like the movie when we watched the movie. It was just not enjoyable for me. But now, having listened to it with adult ears, it was amazing. I loved every minute of it. I was so glued to this story, I did not want to put it down. I did not want to pause my audiobook for any reason. I was like, I'm going to finish this. And I did. I listened to it in one day, but I also listened to my audiobooks on like 2.5 times speed, depending on the narrator. This one, though, I started with 1.5 speed to get used to the narration because I have not listened to an audiobook in a really long time. But as the audiobook went on, I moved it up to 2, and then I was like, okay, I think I can go a little faster. So I listened to it 2.5, and that was perfect for me to retain the information because I could still listen to the words and it still talked fast enough where I wasn't like losing my focus. I'm weird with audiobooks. We've already gone over this. But The Hunger Games, listening to it with adult ears, I had so much more appreciation for the story. I understood more of what was happening. I understood this dystopian world much more. Having read more fantasy books now, like I understood the world and I understood the action and the gore and like all that kind of stuff. I understood the characters' actions better. I thought there were some funny moments that I didn't even catch when I read it as a 13-year-old. So it just kind of goes to show that I shouldn't give up on books completely just because I didn't like them way back then. I still only did give it 4.5 stars though, which I mean, still amazing rating. It just didn't get a full 5 because I felt like some of Katniss's hunting scenes and whatever were a little drawn out and I didn't really care about those. And I felt like some of the arena stuff got a little long-winded too. But that's just me, and I just feel like those parts could have been a tad shortened, more concise to the point. But the ending of that book, major cliffhanger. So of course I had to get Catching Fire right away. Actually, when I was in the middle of the Hunger Games audiobook, I went and I downloaded every single Hunger Games audiobook, even the prequel. So I need to read that too when I'm done with Mockingjay. I have not started Mockingjay yet. I'm working on some arcs, but I will talk about that later. Catching Fire, though, I liked it. I like the concept of it. I know a lot of people rate it higher than The Hunger Games. However, I only rated Catching Fire 4 stars. It still had the action and the dystopian elements that were in the first book. However, I kind of just felt like it was a repeat of the first book, because in Catching Fire, you have the Quarter Quell competition, which this specific competition, I'm going to spoil it. I feel like most people have read the Hunger Games series anyway. If you haven't, though, and you plan to, just skip ahead by 30 seconds. The Quarter Quell for this book was basically just putting Katniss and Peeta back into the Hunger Games arena and them fighting again. So it was basically just the first book a second time, in my eyes. I thought it was going to be different, which it was, because there was this little rebellion aspect to Catching Fire. And the cliffhanger at the end of Catching Fire also had me like, okay, what? Why I didn't start listening to Mockingjay right away? I don't know. I'll get there. I got to be in the mood for it. I got to be in the right mindset to really soak it all in. But Catching Fire just kind of let me down in the sense where it just was like the same. People probably going to be like, it wasn't the same. I thought it was the same. But that's just me. I just like varying plot lines. The plot was just too similar to the first book.
I mean, I haven't read The Hunger Games, but I know a little bit of the movies. So wasn't the first one about setting up what the games were themselves? I thought the second one was supposed to be like the conflict between Katniss and Peeta.
Well, yes, because there's this whole love triangle thing that's happening in these books as well. And Katniss and Peeta are kind of like fake dating in the first book for the sake of the games. And then he actually like admits that he likes her and whatever. And then there's like this whole big argument that happens into Catching Fire, and they're not talking, and they like supposedly like don't like each other or whatever. But that's all water under the bridge when you get to the end of Catching Fire. And like, it's like about the winners tour or whatever for the games, and they're going all over whatever their place is called. I don't remember. The capital. They're going to all the districts, and it's fine. Like, there's tension and there's angst, which I thought was written very well. So like that part was different. And then Katniss catches wind of a possible rebellion happening in other districts. So that part's interesting. But then you get to like the second half of Catching Fire, and Katniss and Peeta are once again in the Hunger Games arena. So that was the part to me where I was like, okay, because I was hoping it would like dive more into this rebellion, which it didn't really do until the very end of the book. So now I got to read Mockingjay.
I see.
But that's just me. I just prefer different plot lines to books in series. Like, I understand it's a series. Okay, like I understand it's going to be like the same theme, the same story, but there are ways to make it different.
Right, yeah.
It's just a weird thing that I have. I don't know. Anyway, Catching Fire was just a 4-star book for me, okay?
I mean, that's still good, like, you know.
It's still a good rating. Like it just like wasn't a 5. Like, all the hype for it that I saw when I was scrolling Goodreads, it just wasn't there for me.
That's fair.
Yeah. So, I mean, Hunger Games, great series. I'm definitely going to continue it. Very excited to read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes as well, which is the prequel. And then there is a new Hunger Games book coming out this year, Sunrise on the Reaping, that I'm very, very excited for after reading the first 2 books so far. Great series. Highly recommend if you love young adult dystopian novels.
Is the new book going to be continuing the story?
I believe Sunrise on the Reaping is Haymitch's story.
I don't know who that is. I haven't read the books.
Oh, he should have been in the movies because he's Katniss and Peeta's mentor.
Oh, I mean, I watched like bits and pieces of the first movie.
Oh, I mean, I'm not a movie watcher, so I only saw bits and pieces of the first movie because we watched parts of it in class. Again, I don't know why we read The Hunger Games for English class in 8th grade. Kind of weird if you ask me.
I mean, yeah, that sounds a lot more interesting than what we did. We were just reading like, well, The Outsiders was good, but like everything else that we read was usually some sort of classic literary thing.
Right, and we did a lot of that too. Maybe we just read The Hunger Games for the sake of our English teacher wanting us to enjoy a book for once. I don't know. All I know is that I didn't enjoy it because I wasn't into that genre back then. But I am now. And like I said, my adult brain really, really liked The Hunger Games. So I know we've kind of gone over that you are reading that Witcher book. But if you were to DNF the Witcher book, what book would you pivot to reading?
Well, technically, on my up next is supposed to be A Court of Mist and Fury.
But are you in the mood to read A Court of Mist and Fury?
Not really.
Okay, so you don't want to put yourself in a slump by forcing yourself to read something you don't want to read. So then what would you read if it's not A Court of Mist and Fury?
I think I want something modern. I think I'm kind of over the fantasy for the moment, just because I feel like I've read so much fantasy recently. So I think I might try to jump to back to, I should say, the Victor the Assassin series, which I would have to pick it up on Kindle. The books aren't that expensive, but it's between that or if I want to read the Dresden Files again by Jim Butcher. Because there's a fantasy element to that, but it's like more of a modern world. It's definitely going to be one of those two. I did think about A Little Hatred that's back there, but that's like, fantasy again. So I don't really know if I want to do that.
Well, if you're looking for something that's not fantasy and is set in a modern world, I do own like 200 books.
Well, yes. I could find one of those that fits my needs.
There are a lot of thrillers out in the living room. I got a little bit of everything, actually.
Well, then what would you recommend?
I don't even know what's out there. I would have to go look and see. But I haven't read a lot of what I own is the problem. However, I do own the first Will Trent book, which is by Karen Slaughter. And it's more police procedural, detective-y type of thing. Criminal Minds-esque.
We did talk about that one. I remember liking the premise of it.
It does have longish chapters, and it is the mass market paperback, so it's like really small, fat book. But it's really, really good. I've already broken the spine, so it should be easy for you to read. And it is set in the 2000s. So it is more modern day. It's not fantasy whatsoever. It is kind of bloody and gory, though, but that's just Karen Slaughter.
Well, fitting to the name.
I still don't know if that's a pen name.
I mean, even if it is, it's a great pen name.
It is. It's just so ironic that her name is Karen Slaughter if it's not a pen name.
That's true. If it's not a pen name, she was truly born to write books.
Exactly.
Maybe I will jump to that regardless, like after I finish this or if I DNF it, because it is on my TBR.
It was really good. It's kind of like Criminal Minds in book form. It's obviously kind of different because the book is laid out in multiple parts, and the beginning kind of starts with following the police, like the actual Georgia Police Department, and then the second part you're introduced to the character of Will Trent.
Right. Okay. That's Triptych. Is that how you say it?
Yes, Triptych.
Okay. Then yes, that's the one that I have on my list here.
I highly recommend.
What about you? What are you currently reading?
I'm currently reading an ARC, so go me. And it is called Trust Issues by Elizabeth McCullough Keenan and Greg Wands. And I actually mentioned this a couple episodes ago with our January new releases. This one comes out on January 28th. And I'm pleasantly surprised with this book so far. It is such a fast read, and I love the character dynamics. It's easy to understand what's happening. It's not too big brainy because this is a thriller mystery type book. It's about the con artist. And it's very interesting how the authors went about creating this story about a con artist, because they have this con artist doing some very sneaky, shady things, and there's murder involved, and his stepkids are involved, his real daughter is involved, and I just love the sibling dynamics that are playing out. And it's kind of like this manhunt to find the stepfather who is the con artist. And I'm almost done with the book. And I really hope the ending is satisfying because I've made it so far, and everything that's played out is very interesting. However, as a reader, I'm not really putting together any puzzle pieces as to what will happen at the end. So I really have no idea how the book is going to end.
I think that's kind of how I like to do things too, though, when I'm reading books like that. Like, I'm not going to try to solve it. I'm just going to let the book tell me.
Right. Like, I'm not trying to solve it, but usually when I read a book like that, there's usually some inkling of what could be happening. Now, I do have one theory that might be something at the end, but also part of me is like, no, that couldn't be possible because of this, and this within the plot. So I'm at a loss here. And there's also this one character that they've mentioned a few times who I have no idea how this character plays into the rest of the story, but he's been mentioned a couple times. So I feel like there has to be something there with this random person. So we'll see. My Kindle tells me that I have less than an hour left of the book. So I'm really excited to see how that ends. And I'm very proud of me for sticking with my arcs so far. I did end up DNFing that Babylonia book just because I really was like not vibing with it. I was about 15-20% in, and it just was not grabbing my attention, and I didn't want to spend any more time on it because I just didn't really care what happened to the characters in this ancient world, and maybe part of me just wasn't in the mood to read about an ancient world. So that's when I pivoted to single player, actually, because I was like, maybe I need an audiobook if I can't keep my attention on words. So yeah, that was a DNF for me, Babylonia. It was an arc too, but whatever, I don't care. And if it's an arc, like, yes, I feel bad that I can't finish it because it was the publisher let me read it early. But also, I'm still not going to suffer through it just because it's an arc.
That's true. And I think if you suffer through it, it's ironic that I'm saying this, but I think if you suffer through it, then you might tend to give it a worse review because you felt like you had to push yourself through it.
Right. And I mean, that's not fair if I'm giving it a bad review just because I was forcing myself to read this book that I really should have just set aside.
Right.
So as a reader, like, yes, I wish I would have liked it because the concept of that book did seem super interesting. And I'm sure the book has its audience because it has really great reviews from a lot of other readers, but it just ended up falling flat for me. However, it makes me super glad that I am really loving Trust Issues. So I'm excited to finish it and, get my NetGalley ratio back up. NetGalley is the site where I get all of my advanced copies of books, and they give you a score based on how many you review versus how many you've been approved for, because that percentage will tell publishers if you actually are reading the books that you are given.
I see what you're saying. So it's like your rating for the publishers to see.
Yes. So like right now, my NetGalley ratio is a 68%, which means I have read and reviewed 68% of books that I have been given to review.
That seems pretty good, right?
Yeah. I mean, they like it to be at an 80%, but I still get approved at 68%. So really, your ratio means nothing sometimes.
I mean, that's fine. It'll go up with time.
Yeah, that's my goal this year, is to just work on my arcs and stay on top of them because there are some gems in there, as I'm finding out. Anyway, we have got a lot of great reads coming up. We've had some hits and misses with recent reads. And now I'm curious to know what you've been obsessing over this week.
I don't really think I have a big obsession this week. At least nothing that can come to mind. I've been listening to music a lot again recently, which is, I go in phases with music. I've been listening to a lot of classic rock recently.
I thought you were going to say classical for a second, and I was like, oh no, I turned you to classical music when I was playing it for the cat.
No, I'm not a big classical guy, but classic rock, on the other hand, I had a radio pop up like on YouTube Music, and it was just classic rock radio, and I decided to listen to it, and I forgot how many of the songs that I really liked. So I've just been like going back through. I've also been listening to like entire albums again. I used to be a very song heavy person. Like I would just pick a couple of songs that I like off of an album or from an artist. But this time I've been actually listening to the whole album and it's good. I forgot that music is supposed to be like linked with other songs that develop, an experience.
Yes, that's what an album should be.
I know. I never really paid attention to it though.
That's why whenever an artist releases an album, I listen to it start to finish. I don't shuffle it. I listen to it in the order that they want me to listen to it in.
See, I used to not care because I used to think that I was smarter than the artist. And I would be like, most of your music is bad except for these couple of singles. And then I would take those and put them in my own playlist. But now I've realized that I was very naive and silly, and you're supposed to listen to it. You can still listen to the single, obviously, but to get the full effect, you have to listen to the album, which is what I've been doing. And it's been really fun. It's also made me find a bunch of songs that I either forgot about or didn't know that I would like. And so that's been kind of fun.
Well, that's good. I don't listen to a ton of music because I'm usually occupied with a book. However, so you know how I was saying that I've been listening to a lot of audio?
Yes.
It is thanks to digital coloring books. I downloaded some free coloring pages and I've been coloring those on my iPad, and it's been very relaxing and very fun. And I have discovered by doing that, I can focus on audiobooks no problem, because coloring is such a mindless thing. There's no other words that I have to look at. It's just the picture and the colors. So my brain isn't trying to read other words as I'm listening to something completely different.
I guess I never really thought about it, but yeah, you're probably using sort of different parts of your brain because one's focusing on just coloring and the other one can focus on like words and other things.
Yeah, like I can't play Dreamlight Valley and listen to audiobooks because I have to read the words on the screen.
Right. It's too much brain activity.
Yeah, and then I zone out of the audio because I'm trying to focus on the words on the screen. So my current obsession has been the digital coloring, and I really want that to turn into real coloring with real markers, with real coloring books.
If you didn't know, this is a hint that she's giving me due to her birthday coming up soon.
I made a whole Amazon wish list.
Yes, I know.
So because I was getting FOMO because I keep getting this recommended Facebook group called Adult Coloring All Skill Levels. And I kept seeing all of these amazing colorings of these coloring books. Like people literally are going all out with making textures and patterns and different sparkle effects and just making the picture their own. And I was like, I want to do that because sometimes I don't want to have to come up with the drawing idea. I just want to color it in all prettily in the way that I want to color it in. So I feel like having a nice coloring book with some nice markers is really going to be like a new hobby of mine.
I get what you're saying because often it's not as, it takes too much thought and brain power to come up with an idea, draw the idea, make it happen, and then color it. So just being able to color it right away is a lot more, it's a lot less brain power, a lot easier on the person.
And coloring is relaxing. Like as an artist, I mean, I don't know if I would call myself an artist, like I paint here and there and whatever. But like for drawing things, I'm very critical of what I do. So I feel like if I drew something and I outlined it and whatever, and then I hated it, I wouldn't even want to finish it. So the fact that I could just color somebody else's drawings, it just scratches an itch in my brain and it makes me very excited.
Well, that's good.
Yes. So I'm hoping for some coloring books and some markers, or just one coloring book and one set of markers. I will be grateful for anything. Even if I don't get a coloring book and markers, like I will still be happy with whatever it is I am given.
That's fair. I guess you'll have to wait and see.
I will have to wait and see. But hint, 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 hint. I'm hinting at things.
Got it. Noted.
Anyways, this was another fantastic episode. I always love having these chill little discussions about books and nonsense and things. So thank you for humoring me with all of the nonsense.
You're welcome.
I am ready to go finish up trust issues. I have a little bit left, so that's what I will be doing for the rest of my day. And I hope everybody has a fantastic week. Stay warm. It is super cold out there. And happy reading.